Hello, ladies and gentlemen. You're welcome to this edition of Talking Point over your Pan-African channel for You Media Africa, where we pick interest in matters pertaining to the African continent. Today, the existence of peace, security, stability, and governance systems are a prerequisite to achieving sustainable economic development and most especially regional stability. It's worth noting that with the increase in crisis across the African continent, and the need for a de-escalation, the question in recent times has been if bad governance could hinder the path to regional stability amidst other factors like ethnic discrimination and intercommunal violence, just to cite this few, which in the long run could undermine the integrity, security, sovereignty, and stability of a nation and a continent. In this context, we're looking at the African continent. Now, this thematic comes a few hours after the chairperson of the East African Community, AAC Salva Kiir, held talks with the Rwandan President Paul Kagame on the root causes of insecurity in the region. In the course of today's edition of Talking Point, we shall be analyzing how bad governance systems hinder regional stability, while reiterating the influence of good governance in fostering regional stability across the African continent. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Talking Point. Do stay with us. Thank you for honoring the rendezvous over your #1 Pan-African channel for You Media Africa. Like every other day, we talk matters affecting the African continent. And today, as you rightly heard in our question for today, our topic of discussion, we are looking at the impact of governance on regional stability. To evoke this topic of discussion, with us in the studio is a country director for the International Human Rights Commission Relief Fund Trust, Cameroon. She's equally a conflict resolution expert. Greetings, JOKEM.
Hello, Sharon. Greetings to our televiewers. Greetings to Cameroonians home and abroad. It is a pleasure to be here once more on Talking Point to chip in my point of view, my opinion, and my little know-how on matters pertaining to our continent, to Africa.
Thank you immensely for honoring our invitation. We're equally joined by Dr. Stanley FONGOD, who is a Pan-Africanist, joining us all the way from the U.S. Greetings to you, sir.
Thank you so much for having me, Sharon. I hope that we can have a fruitful conversation today and also have ways in which we can be able to enhance our ideas and thoughts for the continent.
Exactly. It's all about bringing solutions to African problems. So to kickstart this edition, we dive right into analysis. So I'll kickstart with you, JOKEM. Now, what is your overview of these increasing conflicts we keep experiencing on the African continent, and what impact could this have on regional stability?
Sharon, you know, when you sent me the topic, to what extent governance and other factors hinder regional stability, I paused for a second and I thought it's good we look at what governance is. Because again, you know, when you have to look into a topic, you need to understand exactly what it is about. Exactly. So governance is the system of values, policies and institutions by which a society is managed. It is the way a society puts set of rules to manipulate, to manage its socio-economic and political affairs through her interactions within and amongst the states, civil society, and private sector, which means that if the policies, the socio-economic and political policies are not well placed, are not properly analyzed and reinforced or enforced, there is going to be a serious impact, negative impact, of course, on the stability of this country and the countries surrounding. Hence our question on regional instability, which implies that if there is instability within and around a particular region, a particular community, country, then there is a lot of questions to be posed with regards to the governance policies, the systems that have been put in place to properly manage this society.
So we are talking about regional stability, like you rightly put that in your preamble. And I'll target this next question to you, Dr. Stanley FONGOD. Now, you've listened to JOKEM's introductory statement. Now, with regards to today's topic of discussion, how could governance systems, or better put it this way, how do governance systems affect regional stability, and what are the key governance challenges in societies emerging from conflict?
I think that we need to, first of all, try to, just like she rightly put, define our terms accurately, and then in that way we can fully understand exactly, which course we are chartering. And I also do believe that before we even start talking about governance, we also need to be able to find ways in which we can be able to merge what is it that has been imposed on us by reason of colonialism in relationship to, the democratic process that we seems to so much be faltering, every turn of the way, and vis-a-vis who we are as a people in relationships to our cultures. So in reality, if we are going to probably not define those terms but just look at what we have, I think that what we have can work. But the problem is it's going to be extremely very difficult for it to work. If you look at countries where we have had the so-called democratic process fully enshrined, countries like Nigeria, countries like Ghana, maybe in most part countries like South Africa, the problems we have is that whoever comes into power, especially if we look at those countries that have had multiple elections successfully, how be it we call success, but those who comes into power always have the tendency to sabotage those who, that they're taken over from, because the institutions are a whole lot more powerful than the country, in such a way that the political party becomes more powerful than the integrity of the nation itself. So people come to power to be able to enhance the image of the political party, not the image of the country. So the people of the country do suffer while, political parties literally flourishes. Now, those are the issues that we have insofar as governance is concerned. We have to make sure that we have institutional integrity, which is extremely very necessary if we are going to basically be able to run the country. The rule of law has to be there, we have to basically get people accountable, especially when it comes to public matters and matters of the state. Well, that which will be having extreme difficulty in trying to be able to navigate, when it comes to what we look at governance vis-a-vis the integrity of the nations themselves. So we must be able to find ways to marry these two. I think these are the issues that we have at hand.
Exactly, you've cited a lot of key points, but then there are other factors that hinder regional stability and in line with governance systems across the African continent. And now, JOKEM, aside governance, which we have been citing since we mentioned in our preamble, what other aspects hinder regional stability across Africa?
Of other aspects that hinder regional stability in Africa. However, I would like to mention that when we talk about a society, we cannot leave out governance. So in as much as we will talk about other elements, we cannot seclude them from poor governance. Regional instability can result from a multiple number of factors, right? Ethnic or tribal animosities, religious discord, competition and confrontation over source of natural resources. Bad governance is, however, one of the fundamental causes of regional instability. And like I said earlier on, we cannot seclude poor governance or bad governance, yes, from these other causes. Corruption, implementation of unfair policies, and deception of the masses are traits of poor governance, right? So when you look at a community where, like my co-panelist rightly said, we have institutions that are stronger than the society, it's very eminent that we have problems of instability. When we have ethnic conflicts, intertribal conflicts, it is as a result of governance issues, of poor governance problems, right? Yeah. So if I take, for example, Nigeria or Cameroon, or of course we're talking about Africa as a whole, constitutional democracy is a question. it's a big problem. And when the masses are not satisfied with the livelihood, with the way they live in their communities, they tend to struggle amongst themselves. They tend to fight. Tribes fighting tribes because there is a struggle to prove who is stronger or who owns which part more than the other. And the government is silent. I will continue mentioning the government because I do not want to agree that some factors can be kept aside from poor governance. When you see citizens in a country, these are some of the things that cause instability. Mass influx into other countries will lead to movement of people, right, from one region into another. Now, on the region from where the people, the exodus, the region of exodus, on the region from where the people live, you realize that there is a massive, there is a strong influence on the economic evolution of that community, the social evolution, and even the political evolution of that community, because the populations, the masses that are supposed to develop that community socio-economically and politically and otherwise, they are not there. They've moved. And now on the community, the host community, there is also a huge problem, because this is where you see people that they call strangers, of course strangers because it is not their community of origin. They get settled into a particular zone, and then wars or conflicts, let me not call them wars.
And that is the cause of conflicts across Africa.
That is the cause of conflicts across Africa. But I will say that if governance policies in Africa were properly checked, right? If governance policies in Africa, if constitutions, if institutions were made less powerful than the communities, we will have less problems of exodus, movement of people from one region to another. Because why do they move? They are looking for fertile ground. They're looking for areas where they could live more peacefully. They're looking for areas where they could be more accepted. They are looking for areas where they could feel like they have an influence on the authority, which unfortunately is not a reality in Africa.
So, now, you said something about institutions. Now, I would like to get back to that. I'll stay with you. I remember an expert once said that Africa needs strong institutions, not strong individuals. Could you quickly make a comment on that?
Africans need strong institutions, not strong individuals, because when the individuals are strong, when we talk about individuals, I would link it back to what my co-panelist earlier said, political parties, because basically, when you talk of governance in Africa, you're talking about the politics in Africa, the ones that have been put up to rule, you know, they're supposed to guide, but they end up ruling Africans. These individuals, these political parties are supposed to rule for the people, with the people, by the people, right? That is the idea of proper leadership that we have as Africans. Unfortunately, this is not the case. And this is where we say individuals become more powerful, because they are serving for their own gain at the detriment of their people. They are serving for their own interests and not the interests of the masses, hence weakening the population, weakening the society. And I would want to add something here by saying that it's rather sad that in Africa, almost all of our countries, Africa is still so much under the influence of colonial masters. I will say this, you know, if you call me up here every week for the next, I don't know, millennium, I will say so. Africa is still very much under the influence of colonial masters. Our leaders are still stooges. So in as much as they don't even serve the people, they are serving the wrong cause, they are serving the wrong people. They are serving the ones that have blindfolded them and made them to believe that they've given them the power, right? And that is why you see in a country, we could talk about famine, whereas the lands are fertile. We could talk about poverty, whereas there are lots and lots of mineral resources, but the exploitation is done by foreigners who will come and just carry everything away from us, make themselves more wealthy, and we continue suffering, and we continue talking about regional imbalance, and we continue talking about conflicts, ethnical conflicts and all the like.
So now to proceed with you, Dr. Stanley, you've heard a very constructive analysis which KAAH had to say, but then in the wake of the litany of several pressing issues which Africa faces at the moment in a bid to unravel the in-depth of these escalating tensions across Africa, what is the root cause of all these ongoing crises which the continent is experiencing at the moment?
Well, first of all, I think I really appreciate it. I appreciate rather what my co-panelists said, especially when it comes to African leaders being stooges and they're puppets for sure. When you see a 46-year-old French president literally talking to a 70, 80-year-old African president, as if to say they are pals just because he sits at the French hem, and obviously which is basically the seat of control, of power on the continent of Africa. You know, that's something else that I never thought I would be watching in my lifetime. For over 4 decades, I have been able to literally have a closer view as to what is happening around the world, especially with the issues on the African continent, and it's quite disconcerting to see this level of madness. But that being said, that's the reality of where we are today, and that's what it is. When you look at the African continent, I think that most Pan-Africans make an extremely difficult statement, and that is that almost every other thing else that is happening on the African continent, it's probably colonial in nature. The reality is that there are also geographical issues that is literally one of our biggest problems so far as the continent is concerned. The continent is literally a buffet of everything natural known to humanity. We have the huge desert, we have the huge forest, you know, we have great savannas, and one of the major problems we have is that none of our waterways inland of Africa is literally navigable by boats, and the reason for that is because of our topography. If you look across the continent of Africa, you will realize that most of the major cities are actually along the coast. There's a reason for that, because vessels reach those ports easily. But it is not possible to carry anything, you know, inland into Africa, because none of our rivers can actually be able to do that. The Niger in Nigeria, you know, all the way through Timbuktu, that one can only take small boats, and during the rainy season. The Nile can absolutely do nothing. You can basically just go on a mini safari boat, because the Nile is not deep enough for anything. If you look at the Congo, which is basically one of the largest we have, but the Congo in itself is a series of waterfalls. As a matter of fact, if you try to navigate the Congo, you know, you will basically go across a series of waterfalls. That's the nature of the continent, and whatever is inland is basically not developed, but whatever is along the coast, you can look at all the major cities we have, they are all along the coast, and those are the cities that develop the fastest, and today, those are the only cities that we have that has developed. One of the things that we really need to start talking about in how we can be able to find ways to create railways, right? Railway systems that takes goods, especially containers of goods, from the coast inland. That's the only way countries that are landlocked can be able to really benefit. Those countries are really suffering. They somewhat get into agriculture, but most of their food, you know, produce cannot be able to have access to the coast. That's a huge difficulty, even in the areas of mining. If you look across the Sahel, you realize that the fundamental problem why the Sahel is because of its geopolitical place, that is geopolitical nature, where it's placed actually, and with all the other influence that is coming in from the north, and where it is on the African continent. It is extremely very difficult to be able to have that piece of land experience any kind of growth. But I'm hoping that somewhat we must have a conscious effort on the African continent that for the development of the continent, we have to be able to make sure that those countries that are along the coast find ways in being able not just to collect taxes, you know, in relationship to goods that are being shipped into their countries as goods transit those coastal nations, but that they have to be able to find ways in which we have railway systems that help enhance, you know, the economic strength of those countries that are inland. I think that we have to look at that. If not, it's going to be a little bit difficult, you know, because now whatever policies there are, with those countries that are landlocked, they still will not be able to have any kind of economic growth. We need to have real mechanisms that is able to help these countries that are landlocked, you know, basically flourish.
Exactly. It's all about Africa enhancing or harnessing what it has for its own profit. Now, you've cited a lot of profitable or a lot of insightful comments in your contribution, so to say. But then I'd like to proceed with you, KAAH. Back to the regional institutions. Now, could regional institutions on the African continent accelerate the quest for regional stability, development, and possibly integration?
When you talk about regional institutions, what are you referring to?
We're looking at, we have the African Union, we have other regional institutions across the continent.
Exactly. When you talk about regional institutions, you're talking about the African Union. You're talking about all these institutions that have been put in place, so to say, to check, right, the proper governance in African states. And like last, but or like the last program that I was a part of, we're talking about this same African Union. And I remember I did mention that the African Union is actually the come together of African states, right? That they come together and they put in place, they decide to put in place a strategy. They decide to put in place a roadmap by which they are supposed to properly take care, not to say rule, by which they're supposed to properly take care of African countries, hence of the continent. Now, when regional institutions fail to check problems of autocracy, dictatorship, corruption, bribery, greed in the continent, there is no way we can avoid instability.
Exactly.
Because in as much as the masses want to complain, I will take an example of Cameroon. In as much as the masses want to complain of poor governance in the country, they want to complain of crazy corruption and bribery, they want to complain of nepotism, they want to complain of conflicts here and there. How many tribes are in Cameroon? Regardless of all these complaints, the ones that have been mandated to ensure that there is peace in the continent are these regional institutions which are failing. Institutions cannot be put in place to take care of Africa as a continent, yet these same institutions submit to colonial masters, the same colonial masters that have ensured that Africa doesn't evolve, that Africa doesn't come out of the cave from where it had been buried hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years ago. These are the same institutions that do not take into consideration the plight and the complaints of their citizens. For how long has the AU been existing, and other so-called regional institutions that have been put in place for the sake of peace? I do not intend to say that they have totally done nothing, but it will also be, you know, erroneous to say that they are doing a lot. Looking at the degree of damage that is happening in Africa and the magnitude at which it is rising on a daily, I think we should have been progressing from worse to better, right? But on the contrary, we see Africa going down the drain, more and more conflicts coming up on a daily, whereas the AU is supposed to be expanding and is supposed to be recording more progress. There is some little progress. Again, I'm not saying AU, you're doing nothing, but I'm saying that what you're doing as a regulatory institution is not matching up to the needs of the continent, which means that there is a lot of questioning that should be done at the level of your own governance policies that you've put in place. How do you check the states? How do you check internal governance of the countries? How do you moderate the autocracy that is existing in certain countries, because that is the main problem in Africa, dictatorship, autocracy. How do you check the fact that constitutions, constitutional democracy is not respected in Africa? How are you checking the fact that citizens keep thinking, Africans keep thinking that greener pasture is out of Africa? Or how do you even put your check measures on the fact that America, Europe, all these other powerful continents, they keep extorting us of our strong minds? The best of Africa is always taken out to develop all these other areas. This is what regulatory institutions are supposed to be doing, which they are very much not doing, or doing very little to make sure that Africa becomes the Africa we want.
Africa becoming the Africa we want. Now, Dr. Stanley, you've listened to your co-panelist, KAAH JOKEM. Now, in your, your analysis, what are some of the necessary conditions to achieve stable governance across the African bid to attain this regional stability we're talking about?
I think that she said something that was remarkable, and it's all about finding ways in which, as we speak of the regions, we are basically thinking that maybe communities like the ECOWAS needs to be able to help, or the EU, needs to be able to help. But the reality is that individual nations are sending their worst to the EU. All right, so you have presidents that are already as corrupt as they get, and then they get to this, club of corrupt men and corrupt women who are basically as evil as it gets. And then guess what happens? They now turn around and they start basically kowtowing to the powers, in different nations. And so obviously it's a club of corrupt men. It's not a club that is meant to be able to enhance anything so far as the continent is concerned, in my opinion. And I think that my opinion is pretty much laced with plenty of facts. My thing is this: if we will absolutely want to have any kind of regional stability, and then have these blocks be able to mediate and help in relationship to what's happening in those countries, we first of all need to make sure that we go back to the root causes of these issues, take care of good governance, elect men and women who are Pan-Africans, men and women who think more about the continent, men who think more about their people rather than themselves, to be able to go to, these blocks and be able to legislate as to whatever is happening in these individual nations. As long as that is not the case, what will happen is you will have thieves, being pushed into these organizations, into these blocks, and then in the end, all they will do is kowtow to their friends, and of course they know themselves and their foes, and that's why we have people who basically stays in power for as long as they can, and yet nobody says anything about it, because these regional blocks are doing whatever it takes to be able to keep them in power.
Before we proceed with today's analysis on the topic of discussion, we will first of all take this contribution done for us by Mr. Mbara, who is a political analyst here based in Cameroon. We shall welcome this from the technical department, and when we come back, we shall continue the analysis.
I would say there are some truth that maybe just some few patriotic Africans will come and pass the message. When I talk about the truth is one, I've been that historian that has keenly observed since when I was reading history, studying it. I asked myself that, but what's happening that within a particular period of time we have instability. Within a particular time there is war. Thousands are being internally displaced. Thousands migrate. Thousands are being killed. And in order to address these problems, gave me more opportunity to look for the solution. Now, We'll start first by taking an example from Germany. When you look at someone like Otto von Bismarck, he fought for German reunification. For German unification. And when you look as of now, we can say Germany is well unified. And it is difficult for you to get issues within internal conflicts within German states, because they understood the advantage of unity. Unity means strength. Coming now on the aspect, I will tell you, most of this regional instability is because they are divided. That is just the reality. They are divided. So within a state, a president says, okay, we are putting in place federalism. When you say you are putting in place federation, you are putting in place regionalism, you are putting in place decentralization. The question is, what is the impact of that? People say, okay, they want to manage their affair, cutting away from the central government. If you want to manage your affair, it means you are indirect. But some people will say, no, we are indirectly cutting ourselves from the central government. But that is where the problem lies. Because you are dividing. What we have to remain with the central body. We have to remain with the central body. We have to remain as one. We have to remain as one. If some, maybe the viewers that are watching the program, if they cannot understand from that direction or what I'm trying to explain, let them look maybe what the Bible says in John chapter 15 verse 5, that I am the vine, you people are the branches. So if we remain in the vine, we will bear good fruit. But if you cut yourself off, you are going to dry off, and the next thing will be burned, and that is the problem. Majority for a second. And that is why you get people that are being killed. They say they want to lead them, they want to manage their affair. We must not kill ourselves because we want to stay seat. We want to practice, and so a president and say, okay, let me appease the people and give them autonomy. Without to the region, the next is that from a region it will go to division. We are for autonomy. So also come and say that we are asking for autonomy. So instability. So that which means when we put in place a system of administration, it has a great impact. And a good example with Germany, they fought hard for unification. They should be one. They should be one. Because to this particular people of what they are asking, tomorrow and say you have received it. Let me open. Like the same thing that with Austria-Hungary. They get autonomy. Now, they needed autonomy. We should also ask our autonomy.
Thank you immensely, Mr. Ba Raoul, for your contribution. Now we proceed, and we were discussing, of course, governance, how it hinders or how it affects or impacts our regional stability on the African continent. Like I mentioned in our preamble, we have as guest KAAH JOKEM, who is the country director for the International Human Rights Council, and we equally have Dr. Stanley FONGOD, who is a Pan-Africanist. So we now proceed, and I would take this next question to you, KAAH. Now, being part of the International Human Rights Council or community, so to say, Now, how does this body assist? Because it's all about those that have been affected by conflict. It's about them being able to, say, wake up from whatever they went through and be able to move past that and contribute to the development of the continent. Now, how does this body assist respective sectors in a bid to foster regional stability?
Thank you for your question, Sharon. The IHRC, the International Human Rights Commission, home is Africa. Home is not elsewhere, you know. In Germany, like someone was saying in his comment, it's not in the US, it's not in England, and for whatever reason any African could be there, they should remember that there is home, right? So the IHRC is very much focused on the protection of human rights, and the projects and activities of every chapter is unique to their own challenges. Like the way we will implement activities in Cameroon, we have the same objectives like the IHRC in every other country, but the implementation strategy or the particular projects could be unique to our own specific reality. I would take an example of some recent work that we did, having to help or push for the repatriation of some Cameroonians that were stuck somewhere in India. And you see very intelligent, smart, energetic young men who flee from home because they think that life will be better for them elsewhere. And unfortunately, procedures are not respected. It's taking a long time, and someone could lose their life in the process. And just many things can go wrong because, again, institutions are not doing what they are there to do. They are focused on other things other than protecting. The commission is out to paint the government black, you know, to show that government is not doing this, government is poor, and no. IHRC is out to ensure that where there are loopholes in the government, we point them out and then assist to make sure that the things are done correctly. However, autocratic leaders, lots of chapters are facing difficulties because of the greed, you know, because of the corruption. They don't let you do things the way they're supposed to be done. They don't let you follow the right path to get